On today's edition of Cronkite Sports Live, Bobby Hurley and men's hoops played host to UCLA earlier this week. We'll have the highlights from a wild game at DFA.
ASU hockey hosts an up-and-coming Augustana team this weekend at the Mullet in a series that has become a must-win for the Devils.
The Sun Devil swim teams are lighting it up in the pool this season, and they are set for a ranked matchup this weekend. All of this and so much more on Cronkite Sports Live. CSL is back. Tell a friend. I'm Riley Swenson. He's Ben Paris. Ben, how was your break, man?
Riley, I wish I could tell you how I really feel about my winter break, but I'll save it for later.
All right, that's probably a good idea, but Greg Powers told us how he felt after being swept against Cornell last weekend. Let's take a listen.
Well, I mean, it's obviously disappointing. You know, I mean, we battled back last night and dropped a heartbreaker in OT, and with how we started today, we felt, you know, for the first 12 minutes, we felt really good. We looked good. We were executing how we needed to play. The energy was good on the bench. It was a great crowd tonight. It sucks we couldn't have performed better in front of them. But it is what it is.
It was just the first time this season that Arizona State hockey had dropped back-to-back games, and this weekend they'll try to start a new unbeaten streak. But before they do, we welcome in WCSN hockey reporter Eric List. And Eric, we'll get to the Cornell series in just a moment, but Sun Devil hockey had a very successful month of December. How was the winter break stretch for the Devils?
They couldn't really win any better, going 4-0-4 in the month of December. And they took home 2 trophies. That's exactly what they set out in their plan when they started. They wanted to win the Adirondack Winter Invitational, and then, of course, their own Desert Hockey Classic. They did that both. So it was a good month of December that even rolled into a little bit of January as well for the Sun Devils before that rough Cornell series, put it nicely.
Now let's talk about that Cornell series. This past weekend was not pretty for Sun Devil hockey as they never had a lead during either of the 2 games. What was going wrong against the Big Red?
Really, it just looked like Cornell was a team that clearly had time to do their homework. They didn't play again until seeing Arizona, so they had it off completely from from all the way in Lake Placid all the way to playing Arizona State. So it really looked like a team that had time to watch film, practice, and really come at Arizona State, and it showed. Arizona State really only controlled about 7 minutes of that opening period of the first game, and then they had a stretch in the third period where they were able to tie it up, but even overtime really didn't look good. And same flip the strip game too, didn't look good either. Arizona State looked good to start, but just couldn't find a way to close. Cornell got a couple goals, and away it went, and the sweep it was.
The end of the season will be here just before we know it. What does the Sun Devil stock look like right now if they want to make the tournament for the first time since 2019 in their final year as an independent program?
It's a big question to answer, but they don't need to win out, so I'll put that out there. However, it becomes uber necessary to take care of these games at home. The pairwise rewards winning games at home, but it hurts you more if you lose those games. So road losses and wins are viewed by a factor of 1.2, meaning if you lose, it hurts you more at home than a win. So they got to close out in these next 12 games. They probably got to go 7 of 8 at home, and then maybe try to go 2-4, 3-4 on the road when they face both the Alaska schools. So they've got some work to do, but they're definitely not out of contention in making the tournament.
All right, Eric, thank you very much. Puck drop tonight is going to be at 7 o'clock at Mullet Arena.
Let's take a look at how these 2 teams stack up. Both of them newer programs. Of course, ASU started back in 2015, but Augustana, they're very similar to where ASU was. They started this season. They're going to be in the CCHA officially a couple years from now, playing a full schedule, already kind of a member of that conference. Of course, ASU headed to the NCHC, a beautiful new arena being built in Sioux Falls, but the record, you can see what playing a few years of Division I hockey gets you. For more, though, on Augustana, we send it to our hockey reporter, Gabby Chernow.
Yeah, Riley, lots of similarities between these 2 programs in their first year as NCAA D1 teams, but a key difference comes in if we look at their rosters. And their inaugural season, Arizona State took a D1 club roster and started playing like D1 hockey. Augustana, on the other hand, has a roster full of competitive veteran hockey players. 15 of the 27 men on the Vikings roster are veterans of junior NCAA hockey, some of which come from powerhouse programs such as Ohio State and Wisconsin. Head coach Jarrett Raboyne spent the past 4 years assistant coaching college hockey Blue Blood, Minnesota to and a Big Ten championship. So some real experience and knowledge of this level of hockey.
All right, we promised you that we'd have them. Here are the highlights from Wednesday's game between ASU and UCLA. It was Adam Miller getting going early. Now he's going to dish one here to Sean Phillips. Trust me, we'll see more from Sean Phillips in just a moment. But Adam Miller had 9 of the team's first 11 points, but this is really the story as the game progressed. Adem Bona says, "Get that out of here, Jose Perez." That's one of his 7 blocks on the night. That's a career high. End of the first half here, Frankie Collins using those pivot feet well. Sun Devils would take a lead into the halftime break, 36-23, but unfortunately for ASU, there was a whole nother half of basketball to play and plenty of action. It started right here. UCLA starting the comeback. Lazar Stefanovic in transition. They're going to rule that eventually a flagrant foul on Adam Miller. Then Sean Phillips decided he had some words for the UCLA Bruins. One technical there, and then he wasn't quite done. Another technical. Sean Phillips out of the game. UCLA came into the possession down by 6. They would leading by 1 after making all 4 free throws and a 3-pointer. So the Sun Devils now trailing, but Frankie Collins coming to the rescue late in the second half. Sun Devils down by 1. That 3-pointer puts them up by 2, 56-54. He's fired up, trying to lead that comeback effort, the point guard Frankie Collins. But later in the second half, you can see Bobby Hurley there. Later in the second half, tied at 60, Bryant Celebunge with a foul on Sebastian Mack, gets in his face, and that's another technical on Bryant Celebunge. 4 technicals in the second half for ASU. Jemiah Neal also had one there, and Bobby Hurley, you see that tie that was on earlier? Well, he's none too happy with the officials or his team for that matter. Alonzo Gaffney down by 3, needs to miss the free throw, and of course he makes it. Sun Devils eventually wind up losing by 2 as UCLA is able to run out the clock, and you mentioned Bobby Hurley was none too happy. Here's what he had to say after the game.
Stars, I wish I could say how I really feel. Wish I could say how I could really feel right now, but I'm not going to do that. I am not going to say how I really feel. So I am just going to start out by saying, when you look at the stat sheet, proud of my team's shooting percentages, from 3, from 2, against a very good defensive team that's starting to find itself, and had 6 turnovers as opposed to their 11. And that's all I'm going to say, really. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to talk about how I feel right now. So feel free to ask me anything you want right now. So say hello to the bad guys. You may never see a bad guy like us again, but that's who we were tonight. We were the bad guys. So I'm sure no one else said anything except us all night.
Well, there you have it, the breakdown of that second half. You can see UCLA, they lead in free throws, less technicals, rebounds, and field goal percentage, and you're probably going to win a lot of games if you can do that in the second half. And now to talk more about that game, we bring in our basketball reporter, Devin Henderson. And Devin, I mean, how does ASU lose that game? They go into the break leading by 13. We saw the highlights, but what in the world happened?
Right, I got 3 words for you. Second half meltdown. This is a game of runs. We all know that. And, dog, ASU was up 15 early in the second half, and they lost all of it. Why? Due to that run. They lost the middle of the floor down low. And because of that, they started collapsing, giving more space for shooters outside. Everything kind of breaks down around that. Adem Bona, early in that second half, he had this run where he catches Adam Miller on the fast break and volleyball spikes his shot into the 3rd row. He dang near jumped over his head to block that shot. Comes out on the other end, and he dunks the ball so hard, I thought he was going to rip the rim off the hoop. Right, and so because of that, again, like I said, ASU starts thinking, maybe we can't guard this guy one-on-one down low. They start collapsing, sending more people down low. Shooters start getting open. Lazar Stefanovic, he gets 15 points in the second half. He starts hitting his shot, and that leads to frustrations. UCLA goes on a run. The lead starts dwindling, and that's when the texts come out. Like you said, Sean Phillips got those 2 texts with about 10 minutes left in the half. UCLA turns that into a 6-point swing, and from then on out, the doubt starts to creep in. ASU starts thinking maybe we might lose this game, and in any sport, once that doubt creeps in, nothing good is coming from that, and UCLA sees it out from there.
Yeah, Devin, in a weaker Pac-12 this season, an ASU team so desperate for wins they want to make a run at the NCAA tournament, they can't have these second-half meltdowns like they did on Wednesday, but they've kind of been a trend.
Well, they both benefited and lost from these meltdowns. You look at TCU in early December, 28-28 at halftime, they lose by 20. They let up a run there. TCU out-rebounded them and outscored them in the paint that game, and the key stat for you is ASU was 25% from three. If you're going to let up the paint, if you're going to get dominated down low, you better be hitting your shots on the other end, and they weren't doing that. But then you look on the flip side against Utah earlier this month. It's a 2-point game with about 8 minutes left. 23-9 ASU run to close out that game against a quadrant 1 team. Riley, that's not an easy team to beat, and they dominated them there. And yes, they were out-rebounded and outscored, but they hit 43% from deep and 50% from the field. They were hitting them shots. If they do lose control of the paint, but they're shooting, they're going to be all right, and it just comes down to getting hot at the right time.
All right, it's that UCLA game. It's in the rearview mirror. They have USC tomorrow at noon at Desert Financial Arena. Another solid team in the Pac-12 that could go a long way in determining, not only the Pac-12 race, the postseason eventually. What do they have to do to get past that UCLA loss and move on to tomorrow?
Well, lucky for ASU, USC is coming in with a depleted offense, right? Boogie Ellis is their leading scorer. He was questionable for this game. He's missed the last 2. Isaiah Collier is a projected top 3 pick in the NBA draft. He was their second leading scorer. He's going to be out for a while, and USC they run at kind of a smaller lineup, right, with forwards DJ Rodman and Kobe Johnson, both standing 6'6". They kind of run that 4 role, so ASU can lean on their defense because they match up size-wise. And when you're able to lean on your defense, they're going to be able to control the paint for a little bit longer, which is going to give their offense more space to create. And like I said, once they start cooking, they can compete with anybody in the Pac-12.
All right, Devin, thank you so much for your time. Sun Devils, of course, back in action tomorrow against USC. We will have the coverage here at WCSN across all of our social platforms. The seasons for both ASU men's and women's basketball have had some ups and downs. For a Wall Street-style breakdown of both teams' seasons, let's send it over to Ben Paris and Max Zepeda.
All right, Zippy, we're checking in on the basketball programs at Arizona State, starting with the men's team. And Bobby Hurley said after that loss against Northwestern at Footprint Center, the team wasn't strong. Frankie Collins echoing that, saying they were mentally weak. How have things kind of improved since that devastating end to non-conference play?
Well, one of the things, Ben, that I have been keeping my eye on since that moment, really since that Northwestern game that I know you were present at, was specifically the offensive game plan going forward heading into conference play. And certainly the main thing that I've been impressed with is this 4-guard lineup that Bobby Hurley has been putting out now all season, now into conference play. Talking about players like Adam Miller, Frankie Collins, Jose Perez, Jemiah Neal. That 4-guard lineup that Bobby Hurley's been pushing out now every single game. That lineup has in many ways helped ASU get these big, massive runs going, especially these comeback wins against Stanford and Cal. And don't forget, Utah and Colorado were 2 bubble teams many people thought could be on many people's brackets. Now, because of those ASU wins, certainly put their hopes down, possibly into rest. Certainly very, very interesting to see how this ASU offense has significantly improved in conference play.
They start conference play 4-0, those 2 huge comeback wins you talked about against the Bay Area schools, but all of a sudden they've lost 2 in a row after leading at halftime. So after the stock was gaining some value, it seems like it might be falling again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the many ways that I kind of look at this, I kind of think of this yellow line thinking as ASU men's hoops. They have this high of ASU of Pac-12 play, but then a little bit of a low. But in many ways, they can still go up because their defense has been so consistent all season long. Their defense has really been the mindset that Jemiah Neal, from the moment he stepped into Tempe, he knew that defense was the identity of this team. And in many ways, kind of lacked in the second half of both of those games. So it will be very interesting to see if their defensive second half consistency could possibly put back them in some more wins in the win column. Remember, that UCLA loss was their first loss at DFA all season long, which many people thought was going to happen much earlier in the season.
Let's talk women's hoops. They also play at DFA as well, and they had a good start at DFA in non-conference play, but all of a sudden Pac-12 play starts, and it's the same thing as last year where things kind of just start falling apart.
No, absolutely. In conference play, they have really fallen apart, specifically on the offensive end. They're only averaging 53.8 points per game, the lowest in the pack, 31.8% from the field. That's 6% less, Ben, than every other team in the Pac-12. So very much offense not going so well. And by the way, you may remember after those first 5 losses in conference play, one of those, their most recent one being, in fact, at Oregon State. Their one conference win all season last year. This year, they lose by 37 in Corvallis.
Let's talk about Pac-12 play. We get to talk about it every single week on this show. It's the final season for the Pac, and for women's basketball, it's historically been probably the best conference in the country. Do the Sun Devils really have any hope in the last season in the Pac, or are they just trying to make some final memories and get on over to the Big 12?
Well, Ben, I think one player that I think a lot of Sun Devil fans should keep an eye on to possibly get some intrigue for the stock, maybe even for next year into the Big 12, is sophomore guard Jaylen Brown. Since she transferred from Louisville, she has been the offensive focal point for ASU women's hoops, averaging 21.2 points per game in Pac-12 play, the second most of any player in the conference in conference play. And you may remember, Ben, a career-high 35 points in a loss to number 3 Colorado just 2 weeks ago, the most points scored by a Sun Devil in a single game in the 21st century. So certainly some future hopes look to possibly be lying, even though this ASU women's team all season is averaging losing games by 11.4 points per game margin. That's obviously the worst in the conference. So Jaylen Brown certainly could be someone to look forward to as the team now heads to the Pacific Northwest this weekend and what will be their final time traveling to the Washington schools.
All right, Zippy says buy stock in Jaylen Brown, and you never know what could happen as things continue towards Big 12 play. Riley?
Let's head to the mat for some wrestling here. And you can see the last 4 matches for ASU, a couple of losses, actually a few losses, then they bounced back with a win against CSU Bakerfield. It's been a little bit of a break, and to catch us up with the wrestling team, we sent it over to Crawford McKinstry.
Mats once again, and a lot has happened, so let's catch up on the action. Ja'Cory Teamer ended 2023 by winning the title at 157 at the Midlands Championships, barreling through his competition with a 6-0 record. Iowa State defeated ASU in the first duel of the new year, but despite the loss, 2 Sun Devils stood out. Redshirt junior Julian Klebov shined in a 13-3 major decision over the Cyclones' Ethan Perryman, while freshman Caleb Larkin debuted with a 48-second pin. After falling to the Cyclones, ASU bounced back against CSU Bakersfield with a 43-0 victory. Teamer, Klebov, and Tony Negron all won by fall, and Arizona State also tallied 2 more major decisions on the night. The Sun Devils look to stay hot, but they've got some tough competition on the horizon. With more on the ASU's upcoming opponents, here's Keenan Vaughn.
Sitting at number 12 in the nation, according to the most recent Flow Wrestling ranking, number 24 in the NWCA poll, and Coach Zeke Jones and the Sun Devils have an upcoming gauntlet of opponents that could define their season. Starting with their duel today, on the road at 6 p.m., the Sun Devils take on the University of Arkansas Little Rock Trojans. On paper and in recent history, ASU appears to have the advantage, as they not only have 7 wrestlers ranked in the top 30 in each of their respective classes, but 3 of those being in the top 5, compared to UALR, who only have 5. They also have a perfect 4-0 record against Little Rock, including a dominant 31-6 victory last season. This duel's conclusion also kicks off a grueling 3-duel stretch that begins with ASU going to Pittsburgh to take on the number 15 Pitt Panthers on Sunday. Then the Sun Devils go to Stillwater to take on the number 5 Oklahoma State Cowboys, before coming home to Tempe for their first home duel in nearly a month, in which they go up against the number 16 Oregon State Beavers. With heavyweight redshirt junior Colton Schultz back in the fold, star redshirt senior Ja'Cory Teamer fully returning from injury, redshirt junior Julian Klebov enjoying a tremendous breakout season, freshman Kyle Larkin having a debut for the ages. The potential is there for another season of success for Zeke Jones' team. They're going to be tested almost immediately, but it's as the old saying goes, if you want to be the best, you have to play the best.
Arizona State men's golf got their spring underway on Sunday and Monday at the Copper Cup, and we should have a chance to take a look at some of the highlights here. The team off in Maricopa taking on Arizona in a Ryder Cup style event, head-to-head, some rivalry action as we go out to the 13th hole. This is Preston Summerhays on the par 5, and he went up and down with his partner, Riggs Johnston, as Johnston would make the putt for birdie, and they would win the hole to get the match all square through 4. Up ahead to hole number 14, just the 5th hole of the day. It's a drivable par 4. Johnston's drive was just a little bit short, but Preston Summerhays put it up there real close. That one would be conceded. Johnston would pick it up to tie the hole, and ASU would stay tied against Arizona through 5 holes of play. They would lose the 15th hole, but on 16, this is the par 5, Preston Summerhays pulling 7 wood, going for it in 2, and he sets up this eagle putt for Riggs Johnston all square the match as he drains it. They tie the match for the third time in just their first 7 holes, and they didn't make a par until their 8th hole into the round. This is the 6th hole, their 15th hole of the day, up and down out of the bunker. Summerhays and Johnston were just hamming and egging. The short game was on point. They got that one back to all square yet again after losing back-to-back holes. They were 2 up through 12, and they were all square through 14. This is the 8th hole, a par 3, and up and down to win this hole as their opponents would make bogey to keep the match all square, and they'd end up tying U of A in the morning portion. But ASU would fall in the afternoon by a score of 4.5 to 6.5. They'd go to the consolation round on Monday and beat USC.
Let's take a look at one of the highlights from that cup like Ben was referring to. Luke Potter, the only ASU golfer to win all 4 of his matches. There you see him. He was a 2023 All Pac-12 selection. And our Sam Goodman has more on Potter's success.
Devils embarked on their spring season start this past weekend, finishing 3rd out of 4 teams at the Copper Cup tournament. In a loss described to be painful by head coach Matt Thurman, the team still found themselves with a rising star in Luke Potter. Finishing as the only Sun Devil to notch a full point in all 4 of his matches, Potter became a magician on the golf course throughout the event. Potter started the tournament pairing with Kiko Coelho in an alternate shot match against U of A. From there, Potter dominated in solo play against Tiani Zhang of Arizona, winning by 4 holes with 3 left to play. Potter teamed up with Coelho again on day 2 as the pair nabbed a win against USC, up 3 holes with 2 remaining. In his last matchup, Potter battled out with Shane French, but had a clutch final hole to close off a win. Potter has been one of the most valuable Sun Devils all year, as he managed 2 top 10 finishes in the 4 fall tournaments the team played. With a hot start to the spring, Potter finds himself just where he left off in Cypress Point, with another big win in maroon and gold. Guys.
The Gym Devils are off and running in the 2024 campaign after advancing to the NCAA Regional Finals for the 2nd time in 3 seasons last year. Head coach Jay Santos has finished in the top 15 his squad the last 6 seasons in a row and have high aspirations again this time around. With more, we check in with our all-around gymnastics reporter, Parker Porl.
Arizona State Gymnastics has been up and running since January 8th, and in that time, the Gym Devils have had competitions against 2 top-tier opponents. On its season opener, Arizona State Gymnastics welcomed the reigning Mid-American Conference champions in Central Michigan into Desert Financial Arena. In a meeting that saw ASU's Hannah Scharf, Anaya Smith, and Sarah Clark capture the event titles on the floor, vault, and beam respectively, the Gym Devils were able to open their year with a 195.725 to 195.125 win, its 3rd highest score on a season opener in program history. In ASU's 2nd meet of the year, the Gym Devils took on the 5th-ranked Denver Pioneers in the Mile High City, despite drastically improving fundamentally from their first meet, with Kayla Lee's event-high 9.925 on beam and Emily White's 9.9 on the floor. The Sun Devils would end up falling just short against Denver, 196.9 to 196.375. As a result of the loss, ASU drops to 1-1 on the year, entering this week ranked in the 24th spot.
The gymnastics squad has had a few gymnasts stand out above the rest, and to get us familiar with who those athletes are, we hand it off to WCSN gymnastics reporter Marina Williams.
The Gym Devils season is officially underway, and throughout their first 2 meets, there have been 3 gymnasts who have really shined in the lineups. First up is Pac-12 preseason watchlist member Jada Mangahas. She started her season with a 9.825 on vault and 9.85s on both bars and floor against Central Michigan. Looking to have a breakout season, Mangahas competed in the all-around for the first time in her career against Denver, highlighted by a 9.825 on beam and a 9.85 on bars. Next is Emily White, one of the team's stellar seniors. Her season got off to a bit of a rough start with an uncharacteristic mistake on floor that resulted in the Sun Devils counting a fall. She went into this past weekend's meet against Denver looking for redemption and found it. She competed in the all-around for the first time this season, scoring a team high of 39.375. Finally, alongside the powerhouse senior class, sophomore Kayla Lee is breaking through and paving her way into history. In her typical leadoff spot on beam, Lee opened with a 9.925 against Denver. Not only did this earn Lee her first career event title, but it was also the highest leadoff score that ASU has had in over a decade. Keep an eye on these three Gym Devils as they face Southern Utah and Utah State in ASU's first tri-meet of the season tonight at 7 p.m. For Cronkite Sports, I'm Marina Williams.
2024 is an important year for many Sun Devil swimmers who have their eyes set on the Paris Olympics. But before they go chasing gold medals, their focus is on bringing a national championship to Tempe. The road continues this weekend as the men's and women's teams gets ready for dual meets with Cal and Stanford in what could pan out to be a championship preview for both squads. WCSN swimming reporter Grace Johnson gets us ready for the Pac-12 matchups with the Bay Area schools.
ASU Swim and Dive has a big weekend ahead of them on the road in Northern California, where they will take on a pair of 2023 champions in the span of 2 days, Stanford and Cal. In 2023, Stanford's women won the Pac-12 championships, while the Cal men went home as the national champions. Later today, the Sun Devils will take on the number 9 women's and number 10 men's Stanford teams before they make the quick trip across the bay to Berkeley, where they will race the Golden Bears. The reigning Cal men are currently ranked number 3, while the women are 9th. After ASU's last meet on January 6th, senior Lindsay Looney said that she and her team will have to adjust to the cold up in Northern California, but they have done it before and are excited for these two in-conference matchups. The ASU and Cal men have an interesting and rival-like history. Last season, ASU beat Cal in Pac-12, but Cal reversed the favor and beat ASU at the national level. With these two teams at neck and neck in the past, this upcoming match will likely be a highly competitive one and come down to the wire. As far as the women go, in the past 7 years, Stanford has been the reigning Pac-12 champions 6 out of the 7 years, with Cal winning the other year. Meaning the women are going to have to swim with resilience against this Stanford dynasty. Stanford and Cal have beaten ASU in the past, and it will be interesting to see how they respond this weekend. For Cronkite Sports, I'm Grace Johnson.
I'm joined now by our very own Sammy Miller. And Sammy, with it being the first show of 2024, we thought some of ASU's teams could use some New Year's resolutions. Sammy, just out of courtesy, ladies first, why don't you get us started?
Well, thank you, Riley. When I think of ASU men's basketball, the first word that comes to my mind is discipline. Of course, head coach Bobby Hurley always emphasizes to be aggressive on defense, but when the game is on the line, you have to stick with the script, and that's by playing defense on the defensive end with live feet, active hands. And on the offensive side, you can't just settle for threes. You have to go into the paint and get those active big men.
And Sammy, for a lot of the teams, their resolution is to win, try and make a push towards the playoffs. But for women's basketball, they're in the middle of a rebuild. Their resolution, simply get some wins going for next season. The rebuild's a long, slow process, but a little bit of winning, it can go a long way.
Now let's head over to the ice. The Sun Devils had a dominant first half to their season, but now it's crunch time. In order to make it to the NCAA tournament, there is almost no room for error. With that being said, their resolution needs to be taking care of business from the time the first puck drops until the final buzzer goes off, playing with that hard and heavy mentality that head coach Greg Powers always talks about.
Sammy, I like that resolution a lot, and while hockey season, they're winding down. Baseball, they're just a few months away, and to me, the resolution for them, it's pretty simple. Last year, they had the bats. In the new year, they need to find some arms on the bump because, as we all well know, pitching and defense is what gets it done in the playoffs.
Now, for softball, it's a completely different story. Many of their pitchers are coming back for another season, but there are some major question marks in the field. Their resolution is for their younger players to step up in place of some of their key departures, especially Riley in that outfield.
Well, now into the spring season, let's get a resolution for the men's golf squad. While softball has plenty of key departures, the golf team, they bring everyone back. No, seriously, everyone is back on that team. All signs point towards them being right there at the end, just like they have been in years past. The resolution for them, they got to find a way to finish and play their best golf at the end of the season.
And for ASU beach volleyball, it is a completely new year for them, and it's also a new era for the Sun Devils with Kirsten Rohr taking the reins of the entire program. The new head coach has brought in 5 top-tier transfers and 2 talented freshmen who I know will make a huge impact in Tempe. So their resolution is all about developing that strong chemistry on the sand with all of those fresh faces and making sure they have that game plan set in place.
Last but certainly not least, let's talk gymnastics, kind of my forte if you can't tell. but they made the regionals last season once again, failed to make the nationals, though the resolution for them this season, use that veteran roster they have and train in some of those young girls, but also make another push towards nationals and keep that program rolling.
Now, Riley, I do love talking about ASU's resolutions, but how about yourself? What's your New Year's resolution?
We're just going to try and get in the gym more, but that's neither here nor there. That's all we have for today.
It's Frankie Collins, Frankie Five Fingers, that is, getting the steal there, tips it to Adam Miller. Then it becomes a two-man game. Frankie gets the ball back, makes a defender miss, hits the three-pointer. That one made it a 56-54 game, but Frankie Collins would finish with 16 points in the loss.
Number 2 out on the links, Preston Summerhays using the 7-wood on the par 5 16th hole. Puts that one real nice and close for his buddy Riggs Johnston to tap in the eagle putt. ASU would finish 3rd, though, in the Copper Cup.
Number 1, last Friday, ASU hockey against Cornell. They fell behind 2-0 for a second game in a row. But this, Ethan Schmaggy from Charlie Shane. Schmaggy gets his first goal of the season. Backdoor at Mullet Arena, and ASU fell at Mullet Arena in overtime for the first time in program history. And that is going to close out this episode of CSL. A big weekend coming up for ASU basketball. They play USC tomorrow. And Riley, the only person in Tempe that might be more famous than you will be in town. You never know who you can see at DFA. LeBron, rumored to be in attendance. But in the meantime, for Riley Swenson, our whole crew, I'm Ben Paris saying so long from Studio 6. We'll see you next week on Cronkite Sports Live.